Welcome to another night of Reddit stories to fall asleep to. Whether you're winding down after a long day or just looking for a peaceful escape, we've got a selection of stories that will ease your mind and carry you into the night. We'll dive into the world of heartfelt confessions, unexpected twists and touching moments from real people, just like you, who've shared their experiences on Reddit. These stories are meant to relax, entertain, and soothe you into a calm state, perfect for drifting off into dreamland. So, settle in, get cozy, and let the stories take you on a gentle journey. Take a deep breath. Let go of the stress from today. It's time to relax. Let's get started. Am I the a-hole for destroying my sister's life after she spent years secretly stealing mine, and I didn't find out until our father's funeral? I, 37F, spent the first 30 years of my life believing I was the broken one in our family. My sister, Leela, 38F, was the golden child, the elegant, talented, impossibly charismatic older sibling everyone adored. My parents worshipped her. Teachers fawned over her. Neighbors called her an angel. Meanwhile, I was always too sensitive and too difficult, not like Lila. I internalized it early. I hated myself and idolized her. She was my best friend, my enemy, my obsession, my role model, and my tormentor, all in one. Growing up, things were confusing. I constantly found myself in trouble for things I didn't remember doing. My mom would scream at me for calling Grandma a hag, even though I'd never said a word to her. Dad once grounded me for a week for stealing his cufflinks, which I hadn't even seen. My teachers accused me of plagiarizing a short story I'd written, saying it was too good to be mine. Lila defended me each time with a sad little smile and a shrug that seemed to say, "What can you do with a troubled sister?" I started believing I was troubled. Maybe I blacked out. Maybe I had split personalities. Maybe I was a liar and thief and didn't remember. Lila always got sympathy for dealing with me. People told her she was a saint for being so patient. But as we got older, strange patterns kept emerging. One day, a friend told me Lila had showed up at a college party saying she was me. She used my name, flirted with guys I liked, and then laughed it off when confronted, saying, "It was just a joke." Another time I overheard her on the phone mimicking my voice, telling someone I had dropped out of therapy and was manic again. But I wasn't even in therapy at the time. When I confronted her, she called me paranoid and accused me of being jealous, again. This continued into adulthood. Every time I tried to escape her orbit, something yanked me back. A job offer I was about to get would vanish after the final interview, only to find out someone had called the company and given them information about my mental instability. Boyfriends ghosted me out of nowhere. Friends stopped calling. At one point, I thought I was genuinely cursed. I even got tested for brain damage after a therapist suggested I might be suffering from delusions. Lila came with me to the appointment, held my hand, told me she'd always protect me. Then came the day everything changed. Our father's funeral. Dad died of a stroke in 2022. Lila flew in from LA with her perfect husband and her smile that never quite reached her eyes. At the wake, people kept coming up to me and saying things that didn't make sense. One woman said, "I'm so sorry your father never forgave you." Another said, "At least you got to reconcile before the end." I didn't know what they were talking about. I had been there. I'd cared for him in his final weeks. I'd spoon-fed him oatmeal and read to him in the hospital. Then, after the burial, my cousin Mark pulled me aside. He was drunk, angry, said he couldn't hold it in anymore. "Why the hell did you tell people you were Dad's medical proxy when Lila was?" he asked. I told him he was wrong. I was the proxy. I had the documents. He stared at me. "Lila showed us documents. She said you were unfit, that you'd forged your name onto the proxy forms." My blood ran cold. Mark continued. "She told everyone you had been stealing from Dad, that you'd had a breakdown last year, that you were dangerous and he was scared of you." I was speechless. After the funeral, I drove straight to Dad's lawyer, begged for answers. She was reluctant, citing confidentiality, but finally let slip that there had been two versions of the medical proxy, one naming me, the other naming Lila. The second version had been submitted later, and notarized, under questionable circumstances. I asked to see the security footage from the office. She said they'd had some thefts recently, and many files had gone missing, including one from Dad's safety deposit box. The nightmare unraveled quickly. Lila had been slowly, methodically erasing me from our father's life. She'd intercepted my letters, falsified emails, told the care staff I wasn't to be let in unless she was there. When I was with Dad, she told him I was confused and acting out again. She convinced him I was slipping into delusions. I had wondered why he'd seemed cold to me in those final days. Now I knew. Then came the final blow. The will. Dad left everything to Lila. Everything. The house, the savings, the stocks, the paintings, the family heirlooms, even my mother's engagement ring, which she'd promised me before she died. I demanded an investigation. Lila laughed in my face. "Go ahead," she said. "Try. You'll just look crazy again, like always." But this time I didn't let it drop. I dug. I hired a forensic document analyst. I subpoenaed old bank records. I tracked down the hospice nurse Dad had liked most and recorded her statement. She told me he had cried after signing the will, saying he didn't want to do it, but didn't want to be alone in his last weeks. Lila had told him I didn't care, that I'd refused to visit. I was sick to my stomach. The analyst confirmed the will had been tampered with. Multiple signatures didn't match Dad's earlier documents. The date was off, backdated by a week. The notary listed had died 3 years earlier. I took it to court. The case dragged for months, but slowly, piece by piece, Lila's lies began to unravel. She lost everything. The house, the inheritance, the trust fund, worse. Her husband filed for divorce, saying he'd discovered emails she wrote about faking mental illness for sympathy and bragging about puppeteering the sad little sister. He left her and took the kids. Lila broke. She sent me dozens of emails, screaming, begging, threatening, then sobbing, then threatening again. "You ruined my life," she wrote. So I replied with one sentence, "You stole mine first." Now my extended family is divided. Half support me. The other half say I went too far, that I humiliated her, that I should have let sleeping dogs lie and not dragged this into the public, but I didn't just lose an inheritance. I lost my father's final words. I lost decades of credibility. I lost relationships, jobs, self-esteem because of her. So Reddit, tell me honestly, am I the a-hole for destroying my sister's life, or did she just finally get what she deserved? Am I the a-hole for digging into my adoption and unraveling a secret my parents begged me to leave buried? I, 32M, found out I was adopted when I was 13, and it was one of those moments that splits your life into a before and after. Not because I didn't love my adoptive parents. I do, but because the way I found out made everything else feel like a lie. It wasn't a gentle sit-down talk. It wasn't some teary-eyed confession. It was a fight, a stupid teenage fight over not being allowed to go on a trip with friends. I screamed that I hated them, that I didn't belong in this family. And my mom screamed back, "That's because you don't. We adopted you." Silence. Just like that, the word adopted dropped into the room like a bomb. I don't remember what happened next. I think I ran. I think I cried. All I really remember is the sound of my dad slamming the bathroom door and my mom crying through it, saying she didn't mean to say it like that they were always going to tell me, that they loved me like their own, that I was their own. I didn't say anything. I was just broken. A 13-year-old boy who'd been living in a house built on a secret. They gave me the basics, that I was adopted at birth, that it was a closed adoption, that my birth mother was young and couldn't keep me, and they were chosen to be my parents. I asked if I had any records. They said no. That was the end of the conversation, or so they thought. I tried to pretend I didn't care, but from that day on, I felt like I was looking at life through foggy glass. Like everything I believed about my story wasn't mine anymore. The name I'd written on the front of every school paper, someone else gave it to me. My birthday. Maybe that wasn't real. My blood type? Who knew? By the time I turned 18, I asked again. My parents begged me not to dig. "It'll only hurt you," my mom said. She gave you up for a reason. We're your family. But that made it worse, because if she gave me up, what reason? Was I unwanted, unloved, from a crime? Was I a mistake they never meant to see again? Or worse, did they take me under? Circumstances they weren't proud of. I dropped it for a while, but the itch never went away. At 25, I did one of those DNA tests, just to see. It gave me some ancestry info, but no close matches. Still, it told me something important. I wasn't genetically related to either of my parents, which I already knew, but now I had scientific proof. I also found out I carried a rare genetic marker for a condition called LQTS, long QT syndrome, a potentially fatal heart rhythm disorder. I had no symptoms, but it was scary. I went to a cardiologist. He said I was fine, but flagged it as something to monitor. I told my parents. My dad went pale. My mum clutched her chest and said, "That's why we didn't want you looking. Some things are better left unknown." That just made me dig harder. The real break came a year later when a second cousin popped up on one of the ancestry sites, a woman named Jess. She messaged me, said I shared a large amount of DNA with her, and asked if I was related to the Murphy family from Kentucky. I said no. She said, "You might be. You're a close match to my uncle. He passed away, but his profile is still active. Did you ever know a man named William Murphy?" I didn't, but my hands shook when I typed, "That might be my birth family." Jess was floored. She said she remembered a rumor about her uncle having a child he wasn't allowed to keep. I asked who the mother was. She said, "Honestly, we don't know. It was hush-hush. But Uncle Will went through a dark patch in the early 90s. He came back from New York depressed and angry, said he'd lost something important." That sent chills down my spine. I was born in New York in 1993. That lined up. I asked if she had photos. She sent me one. My heart stopped. The man in the picture had my face, the eyes, the jaw, even the same weird birthmark near the temple I'd always hated. I knew. That was my biological father, but then came the bombshell. She said, "Funny thing though, your dad, Will, he was engaged to a woman named Sarah Cole. Their engagement ended abruptly. My mom always said it was because she got pregnant and her family freaked out." Sarah Cole. That name sounded familiar. Too familiar, because Cole was my adoptive mother's maiden name. I pulled out an old photo album and stared at her prom pictures. My mom had been from upstate New York. Her name was Sarah Cole, born in 1973. She would have been 20 in 1993. I felt dizzy. I called Jess again and asked for more details. She said, "Yes, Sarah was your dad's fiancée, but they broke it off when her family got involved. Some huge blowout. She vanished. He came back home heartbroken, never dated again, really." I sat in silence, piecing it together. Sarah Cole, my adoptive mom, William Murphy, my biological father. They had been engaged. She got pregnant. She vanished. I was adopted. The horror dawned slowly. Had my adoptive mother adopted her own biological son? Had she lied about the whole thing? I confronted my parents. At first, they denied it, said I was confused. Then I showed them the DNA results, the cousin, the photo. My mom cracked. She broke down sobbing and admitted everything. She had gotten pregnant at 20. Her family had been furious, a small-town Christian family with a daughter knocked up by a boy they didn't like. They made her break off the engagement. They shipped her off to a girls' home to hide the pregnancy, told her to put the baby up for adoption and never speak of it again. But when I was born, she changed her mind. She wanted me, but her family wouldn't allow it. They threatened to cut her off financially, emotionally. She caved, gave me up, and then, 3 months later, she and her mother manipulated the system. They found a loophole, used a private adoption agency, lied about her relation to me, and adopted me back with my dad, then boyfriend, pretending to be a first-time adoptive parent. In short, my adoptive parents were my biological mother and her new partner. My father, the real one, never knew. He had no say. He thought I was gone. She never told him, never even sent a letter. I felt physically ill. Everything in my life was upside down. My mother had orchestrated a scheme to keep me while pretending she hadn't. My dad, the man who raised me, had agreed to it, lied on legal forms, perjured himself, and worst of all, they had gaslit me into believing the truth would hurt. And me more than help me. They'd stolen my identity from both sides. I couldn't even speak. I asked her why. She said, "Because I couldn't lose you." But I also couldn't lose my parents. I had to make a choice, so I chose the only path that let me have you without destroying everything else. I asked if my biological father knew anything. She said no, that she never told him, that she didn't want him to fight her, that she hated him by the end. I messaged Jess, told her everything. She cried, said she suspected something, said her family would be devastated, but also grateful that maybe now William's ghost could finally rest. So I drove to Kentucky. I visited my biological father's grave, stood there for an hour, cried, screamed, apologized for being stolen, for not knowing. Then I went back home and cut off my parents. They say I'm ungrateful, that they gave me everything, that they saved me from a broken man, that if I reach out to the Murphy family, I'll be betraying them, that if I expose the truth, they could face charges, lose everything. But what about what I lost? So read it. Now I'm torn. Was I the a-hole for digging, for unraveling a secret my parents worked so hard to bury, for wanting to know who I really am, even if it means destroying the people who raised me? Am I the a-hole for making my sister's husband believe their child wasn't his, just to prove a point? Before I get crucified, yes, I know how this sounds, but I swear I didn't plan it this way. I didn't mean to destroy a family, and I didn't want to be right. I only wanted to protect someone who didn't deserve what was happening to him. Now everyone in my family hates me. Some people are calling me the destroyer of marriages. Others call me a hero. I honestly don't know what I am anymore. So here's the mess. I, 36M, have one sister, Eliza, 34F. We grew up close, or at least I thought we did, until adulthood revealed who she really is. Eliza has always been the golden child. Our mom adored her. Teachers loved her. She was the straight-A student, homecoming queen, captain of the debate team, the whole damn package. I was the weird artsy kid with mood swings and a smart mouth who spent too much time drawing monsters and listening to 9 Inch Nails. While I got grounded for sneaking out, she got $100 for every A. While I got kicked out for smoking weed at 17, she got a car for her 18th birthday. So no, we weren't equal in our parents' eyes, but we were still close enough to share secrets, or at least I shared mine. When I came out to Eliza at 20, she was the first family member to support me. She hugged me and said she already knew. She promised she'd protect me from our dad's reaction, which was predictably a nuclear meltdown. I cried that night thinking I had her in my corner for life. Turns out I only had her when it was convenient for her image. Because years later, she'd weaponized my sexuality against me in a way I'll never forget. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Fast forward a decade. Eliza marries her college boyfriend, Darren. Darren is the definition of a good guy, quiet, nerdy, devoted. He's an engineer obsessed with Star Wars, wears terrible graphic tees unironically, and adores my sister with a kind of blind, worshipful love that made me cringe a little. But hey, she seemed happy, and that's what mattered. I gave a toast. At their wedding, I said, "Here's to marrying your best friend." I meant it. I didn't know I'd one day be the one to rip it all apart. 3 years into their marriage, Eliza got pregnant. It wasn't a surprise. They'd been trying. Darren was over the moon. She gave birth to a beautiful little girl, Ellie, and everyone was thrilled. I became Uncle Max. I loved that kid like my own. She had Darren's eyes and Eliza's smile, or so I thought. Now here's where things get dark. About a year after Ellie was born, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years, Eliza's ex, Ryan. We were at a bar with mutual friends, and after a few drinks, he pulled me aside and said, "Man, it's crazy how much your niece looks like me." At first I laughed it off, but then he said, "Seriously, Eliza and I hooked up like a week before her wedding. She told me she wasn't sure she was ready to settle down." That shook me. I told him he was full of it, drunk and delusional. He just shrugged and said, "I'm not trying to cause trouble, just saying I did the math. I went home and tried to forget it, but I couldn't." Something had been off with Eliza and Darren for a while. I chalked it up to new parent stress, but now I looked closer. Darren was more distant. Eliza had started taking more girls' weekends and didn't seem interested in intimacy, based on Darren's occasional venting during our guys' hangouts. I asked her point blank if what Ryan said was true. She denied it, laughed it off. Said he was a liar and I was paranoid, but her tone was too sharp. Her eyes didn't meet mine. That old sibling radar buzzed. Something wasn't right. Still, I left it alone. Until 6 months ago. Darren came to me one night wrecked, said he found texts on Eliza's old phone she'd left at her parents' house. They were vague, but clearly from someone she'd been seeing right before the wedding. "I miss you. I can't believe you're doing this. He's not you." Stuff like that. Darren asked me if I knew anything. I didn't lie. I told him about what Ryan said. That night, Darren confronted Eliza. She spun it, said Ryan was lying, said I was trying to sabotage her. And then she crossed a line I never thought she'd touch. She told Darren that I had always been jealous of her marriage, that I was secretly in love with him, that I had made up stories to break them up, that I was obsessed with their child and trying to replace her as a parent. When Darren told me this, I laughed at first. Then I realized he wasn't laughing. He actually believed her. He looked at me like I was some sort of predator, like I was unhinged. He said he needed space and asked me not to come around for a while. I was devastated. I tried explaining. I begged him to listen. He just shook his head and said, "I don't know who to trust anymore. I didn't see my niece for 3 months. I didn't talk to Darren. Eliza blocked me. My mom said I'd gone too far and needed to apologize. I almost did. Then I changed my mind because I found an old photo, a baby picture of Ryan, and the resemblance to Ellie was uncanny. I showed it to a friend of mine, a family lawyer, who said, "You know there's a way to get Darren to test paternity without needing Eliza's permission, right?" Long story short, I made a plan. I knew Darren still trusted me even if it was shaky. I asked him to meet me one last time to talk. I told him I was ready to admit the truth, but I needed him to come with an open mind. At the diner, I handed him a manila envelope. Inside was a photo of Ryan as a child, next to a photo of Ellie, and a DNA paternity test kit I had purchased. I said, "I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm asking you to see for yourself." He said, "Nothing," took the envelope, left. 2 weeks later he called me, silent at first, then, "She's not mine." He cried. I cried. I wish I could say it felt good to be right, but it didn't. It felt like death. He said Eliza admitted everything after he showed her the test, that Ryan had been the real love of her life, but she married Darren because he was safe. She thought the baby was his until she saw Ryan holding her one day and realized the truth. And she panicked. She tried to bury it. And when I got close to uncovering it, she threw me under the bus without blinking. Now the aftermath, Darren filed for divorce. He's seeking custody, even though he knows he's not the biological dad, because he's raised Ellie since birth. It's messy. Eliza moved back in with our parents, who now call me a traitor and destroyer of the family. Ryan, for his part, wants nothing to do with Ellie, says he never signed up to be a dad. Eliza's in therapy. Darren is broken, and me, I'm alone. I don't regret telling Darren, but I regret being right. I never meant to blow up their lives. But I also couldn't watch Darren live a lie just because my sister wanted to play house with a man she never really loved. So tell me, Reddit, am I the a-hole for giving my sister's husband the tools to discover their child wasn't his, even if it destroyed everything? Am I the a-hole for secretly recording my fiancé's family talking about replacing me after the wedding, and then playing it during our rehearsal dinner? I, 33M, have been with my fiancée, Vanessa, 29F. For nearly 4 years. We got engaged a year ago, and our wedding was supposed to be next month. I say supposed to be because things have gone completely off the rails, And now I'm wondering if I just blew up everything over something that might have been better handled quietly. Though honestly, I'm still reeling from what I learned, and I don't know how to process it any other way. So here's the story. Vanessa and I met through mutual friends and we clicked almost immediately. She's brilliant, driven, works in tech, and is one of the most socially magnetic people I've ever met. When she wants to, she can make anyone feel like they're the center of the universe. For the first year and a half, everything was great. We supported each other's careers, had good communication, great chemistry, all that. Her family was fine, if a little cold. Her mom, Barbara, was always polite but never warm. Her father, Raymond, struck me as the stern, silent type. And her two sisters, Alyssa, 34F, and Danny, 26F, were friendly enough but clearly very tight-knit with Vanessa in a way I could never really break into. I chalked it up to them being a high-achieving family from old money, not snobby exactly, just very insular. They went on girls' weekends without me, had weekly dinners that I sometimes wasn't invited to, and even once held a secret birthday party for Vanessa I only found out about from Instagram stories. Vanessa apologized, saying it was a misunderstanding. I let it go. Love makes you excuse a lot. Anyway, last summer I proposed. Vanessa cried, said yes, and we started planning the wedding. She wanted a large, elegant ceremony at her parents' estate. I offered to split costs, but her dad insisted they would handle everything. I should have been suspicious then, but I saw it as a gesture of goodwill. Vanessa told me not to worry about expenses and to just show up, look handsome, and be happy. I did all that. Now here's where the story really begins. About a month ago, I dropped by Vanessa's parents' house one Saturday when I knew she was out dress shopping with her sisters. I was stopping by to pick up a box of old childhood photos her mum said she had for the wedding slideshow. I had the house code and texted her mum saying I'd let myself in. The house was empty, or so I thought. I went to the library to find the box and accidentally left my keys on the side table. When I walked back to grab them, I heard voices in the sunroom down the hall. Curious, and yeah, maybe nosy, I crept closer and realized it was Vanessa's. Mom, her sisters, and, surprisingly, Vanessa herself. I was confused because she was supposed to be dress shopping across town. I froze when I heard my name. Barbara. So, after the wedding, what's the plan? Are we just waiting the year? Then starting the process? Alyssa. Yes, once everything is official, we let things settle for a bit. Then it's just a matter of introducing her to some of the candidates again. Vanessa. It'll be easier once we're married. He'll be more open. Plus, I've already laid some groundwork. Danny. God, poor guy. He has no idea. Still, it's better this way. He's not strong enough for the legacy anyway. I stood there completely still, my heart pounding. They were clearly talking about me. But what did they mean? Introduce her to some of the candidates? Not strong enough for the legacy? I backed away slowly, left the house without the photos, and drove straight home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept running over the conversation in my head. I started wondering about all the little things over the years. Vanessa redirecting conversations about kids, her dad once joking that I was a temporary placeholder, and the way her family never made any effort to integrate me. I had no proof. Just suspicion, but I needed to know. So the next week I bought a discreet audio recorder. I know it's shady, but I felt like I was going insane and needed clarity. The following weekend, Vanessa told me she was going to her parents again, for wedding prep. I pretended to be busy and slipped the recorder into her makeup bag, which she always took with her. I retrieved it later that night. The conversation it caught changed everything. They were openly discussing how Vanessa was essentially marrying me for strategic reasons, that I was the safe bet to win over the more conservative business partners in the family's private investment firm, and how after a year or two they'd slowly encourage me to either step away or agree to a mutual open marriage arrangement, which was code for her returning to someone named Julian, an ex from years ago that her parents actually approved of. There was laughing. Someone said, "Let's hope he doesn't turn clingy. I hate when they beg." Vanessa laughed and said, "He won't. He thinks I'm his forever. It's almost cute." I listened to the audio 3 times. I cried. I didn't confront her right away. I was too wrecked. For days I went through the motions, smiling, pretending, all the while trying to decide what to do. Cancel the wedding quietly? Break up and disappear? Have it out with her in private? But then, I got vindictive. Maybe it was petty, maybe it was rage. But I decided if they were going to humiliate me behind my back, then I would show them what that felt like. So at the rehearsal dinner, a classy, catered event at a winery with about 80 people, I stood up after dessert was served and said I had a surprise. Vanessa looked excited. Her sisters were beaming. Her dad even raised a glass. I said I wanted to share a behind-the-scenes glimpse into our journey. I pulled out a flash drive and loaded it into the venue's AV system. It started with a slideshow, normal sweet photos of us. Then the screen went black and audio started to play. I edited together the worst snippets, the lines about replacing me, about Julian, about me being weak, about hoping I don't beg. It was maybe 90 seconds long, but it was nuclear. The room went silent. Vanessa screamed at me to stop it. Her dad stormed the booth. But it was too late. Everyone had heard it. I looked at Vanessa and said, I thought I was marrying someone who loved me. Turns out I was just a pawn. I walked out. I blocked her on everything, called my family, cancelled the honeymoon, took a week off work and disappeared to my cousin's cabin. Now it's been 2 weeks. Vanessa's been trying to reach me. Calls, texts, emails, even handwritten letters. Her family is in full damage control, saying it was a misunderstanding, just joking, and that I blew a private conversation out of proportion. Her sisters are posting vague Instagram stories about betrayal. My parents are supportive, but think I humiliated her too publicly and could have just walked away. So, I ask you, Reddit, am I the a-hole for exposing my fiancée and her family at the rehearsal dinner instead of handling it privately? Am I the a-hole for exposing my sister's perfect life during her wedding reception and ruining her marriage before it began? Throwaway account, because my family knows my main. So, I, 28F, was recently uninvited from my sister Amelia's, 31F, honeymoon and subsequently blocked by her husband, and several extended family members after what they're calling a nuclear sabotage of her wedding reception. I'll start from the beginning, because I honestly need to know, did I go too far, or was it finally time someone said something? My sister Amelia has always been the golden child. She's beautiful, charming, and has always been able to manipulate everyone into doing what she wants. Our parents were pretty oblivious to it and favored her outright growing up. I was more reserved, studious and quiet, and often got labeled as the difficult one, because I didn't like being bossed around by my older sister or dragged into her messes. Amelia has a long history of being, well, messy. She cheated on almost every boyfriend she had, lied constantly to get what she wanted, and always portrayed herself as a sweet girl who just needed a little help. She once even faked a chronic illness in college to get extensions on exams, which nearly got another girl expelled because Amelia claimed she'd stolen her meds. That girl was cleared eventually, but Amelia, nothing ever stuck to her, ever. Meanwhile, I was labeled the jealous little sister if I said anything. So I stopped. Fast forward to now. Amelia met her fiancé, now husband, Ben, 33M, 2 years ago. Ben is genuinely one of the kindest, most soft-spoken guys I've ever met. He owns a small business, volunteers with animals, and treats Amelia like she hung the moon. She's always bragging about how she finally found a real man who respects her and how she's changed so much. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But I knew my sister and I saw things, like her disappearing for weekends and coming back with expensive gifts that she never mentioned to Ben, or how she'd keep a second phone for work emergencies, which she never used when around him. She also went on business trips monthly, but her job doesn't require travel. I started getting uneasy. Then about 6 months ago, one of my friends who works in hospitality DM'd me privately and asked if Amelia was dating multiple men. Apparently, she'd checked into a boutique hotel nearby under her maiden name, with a man who was not Ben, and they stayed the weekend. My friend didn't say anything until now because she didn't know Amelia was engaged. When I asked Amelia directly, she laughed and said, "You're being paranoid. Mind your own business." Okay. So I backed off again. But last month, just 2 weeks before the wedding, I saw her at a bar near my office. She was making out with a guy in his car. I recognized him. He was someone she dated on and off like 2 years ago. I took a photo from across the street. I didn't confront her. Then I just sat on it, thought maybe I'd show her later, make her come clean to Ben. Then the wedding day arrived. It was beautiful. Amelia was glowing. Ben looked over the moon. No one knew anything. I was seated at a table with some of her friends from high school, and all they did was talk about how Amelia always knew how to land a man, and remember that time she pretended to be pregnant to keep Matt. It was all so fake, and I was just boiling. It wasn't even jealousy, it was fury. This woman had been skating through life, ruining people, and here she was about to marry one of the nicest people I'd ever met, and no one was stopping. Then came the reception. After the dinner came the speeches. My dad gave a glowing speech about how proud he was of Amelia. Her best friend Sarah gave a toast that was basically one long humble brag. Then the mic was passed around for open tributes. I didn't plan on saying anything, but something in me snapped. I stood up. I took the mic. I said, "I'm so happy for you, Amelia. You've really outdone yourself, truly. Because I don't think anyone here knows how much work it took for you to juggle 3 boyfriends at once while planning a wedding, or how you still managed to sneak around behind Ben's back while pretending to be someone you're not." There was dead silence. Someone laughed awkwardly, thinking it was a joke. I continued, "I have photos. Of you with Brian. Of you checking into hotels with different names. Of you bragging to your friends about how good you are at lying. And honestly, Ben, you deserve to know who you're marrying." Amelia's face went pale. Ben looked confused. A couple people were trying to pull the mic away from me, but I just dropped it and walked off. I left the venue completely and went home shaking. That night, I got 100 texts, some calling me brave, some calling me disgusting. My mom was furious, said I ruined the most important day of Amelia's life. My dad is disappointed. Ben texted me asking if we could talk, and I sent him the photos and names of people who could back me up. He never replied. 3 days later, I found out they postponed the honeymoon. Then a week later, I learned Ben moved out. They aren't officially divorced, but people say he's taking time. Amelia blocked me everywhere. Our parents say I humiliated her and took something too far. Even some friends have said that I should have just told Ben privately. Maybe they're right, but part of me feels like why should I have protected her image at all? She's lied for years, hurt people for years. I gave her chances, I warned her. She told me to mind my business, so I did, until I couldn't anymore. Still, now I'm the pariah, the sister who couldn't just let things go. So, Reddit. Am I the a-hole? Am I the a-hole for turning my mother over to the police after discovering she raised me as part of a decades-long identity fraud and cult operation, and I exposed her in front of the entire family? Let me start by saying, I wish I were lying. I wish this was some exaggerated Reddit post about in-laws and passive-aggressive comments, but it's not. This is my life, my nightmare, my unraveling. I, 33F, grew up believing my name was Madeline Grace Wexley, that my mother, Carol, was a nurse who had survived an abusive marriage, that we had no extended family because they had turned their backs on us when I was born, that the reason we moved around so much, 10 cities before I turned 16, was because of her dangerous ex-husband, that we changed names occasionally for safety, that I was gifted, sensitive, special, and that people would never understand me, so it was better not to get too close. These were the core truths of my childhood, and I accepted them without question. Because Carol, my mother, was everything. She homeschooled me, fed me books, taught me to fear strangers and adore her. She was warm and cold in equal measure. She'd hold me all night when I had nightmares, then snap at me the next morning for sneezing too loud. I never knew what would set her off, but I loved her. I loved her fiercely. I thought it was us against the world. We settled in a small town in Vermont when I was 16 and stayed there longer than anywhere before. That's when things began to slip. I started school in a first and discovered how far behind I was. My math was years below grade level. I didn't understand basic science. My mother had fed me conspiracy theories instead of biology. When I challenged her about it, she claimed the school was brainwashing me, that they wanted to steal my mind. She pulled me out after one semester and said she'd teach me again, but we never did another lesson. That was the year I started hearing things through the vent at night. Phone calls, names I didn't recognize, and a phrase that stuck with me. She doesn't suspect. She was talking about me. I tried to brush it off, told myself I was being paranoid, but a seed had been planted. At 18, I tried to apply. For college, Carol melted down, said I wasn't ready, that people would destroy my mind. When I insisted, she gave me a social security number to use, but it didn't work. The college said it was invalid. I asked her about it. She said it was a typo, gave me a second number. This time it worked. I thought it was weird, but I was so desperate to be normal I ignored it. I enrolled in a small state school. Carol refused to let me live on campus. I commuted. She waited outside my classes, stared down anyone who spoke to me. Professors started asking if I was okay. I told them I was fine. Then came the day everything cracked. Sophomore year, I got a part-time job at the campus library. One day, while cataloging archives, I stumbled across an old newspaper article from 1995, a photo of a missing toddler named Evelyn Grace Benton, kidnapped at age 3 from her backyard in Pennsylvania. The resemblance was terrifying. She looked exactly like my baby pictures. Same birthmark on the jaw, same eyes, same age, same middle name, Grace. I felt the floor drop out beneath me. I didn't go home that night. I hid in the campus library until morning. I photocopied the article. I compared it to old photos Carol had kept in a box, the ones without dates. I went to the campus clinic and requested a DNA kit. I had never met my father. Carol said he was a monster. I submitted my DNA to 23andMe under a pseudonym and waited. 3 weeks later, I had a match. A 99.9% match. Thomas and Linda Benton, parents, alive, living in Pittsburgh. I stared at the screen for a full hour. Couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't believe it. Then somehow I snapped into motion. I emailed them, said I thought we might be related, said I wanted to meet. We arranged to talk over video. The moment they saw me, they both started crying. Ugly, broken sobs. They said, "You're Evelyn. My God, you're our daughter." I told them I didn't remember anything before age 5. They said I disappeared at age 3. The police had never found a trace. I called Carol, told her I knew. She went silent. Then she laughed. Softly. Not like someone caught, like someone victorious. "Took you long enough," she said. "That was all I told the Bentons. They called the FBI. I don't know what I expected. A confrontation, maybe. A dramatic arrest. What happened was quieter, more chilling. Carol disappeared, left everything behind, except a journal I later found hidden in the lining of her suitcase. What it contained still keeps me up at night. The journal outlined decades of movements, names, identities, photographs, dozens of them, all women, all children, pseudonyms, birth dates, transactions. It looked like a ledger mixed with prayers, pages of rambling text about purity, divine daughters, returning the vessels, and undoing the rot of civilization. It wasn't just Carol. She wasn't acting alone. This was part of something larger. I took it to the FBI. They opened an investigation. Turns out Carol, real name Ruth Mary Langley, had been involved with a cult in the late 80s and 90s known as the Order of the Living Light, a New Age splinter group with a messiah complex and radical views about child-rearing. They believed the world was corrupt, and the only way to purify society was to reset the feminine spirit by taking children from impure homes. Carol, Ruth, had been their primary recruiter. She'd kidnapped me in 1994 after faking her death in a house fire. The cult had since disbanded, but remnants remained. My name had been changed 3 times, my records scrubbed, my birth certificate altered. I was placed under protection while they searched for her. She was found 6 months later in a farmhouse in upstate New York, living under yet another name, with 2 more children. They weren't hers. She was arrested, charged with multiple counts of kidnapping, fraud, identity theft, and child endangerment. The trial began last year. I testified. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. She stared at me the entire time, never blinked, never flinched. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, she smiled. Afterward, people in my life had opinions. Some of Carol's old friends, the ones who still thought she was misunderstood, said I was cruel, that I should have just confronted her privately, that I ruined her, that she raised you with love. My therapist said they were wrong, that love built on lies isn't love, that abuse doesn't become okay just because it felt warm. Sometimes my biological family and I are rebuilding, slowly, carefully, but I feel like I'll never fully belong anywhere. I'm too much a ghost of what Carol made me, too little of who I was supposed to be. So tell me, Reddit, am I the hole for turning in the woman who raised me, even if she also kidnapped me and erased my identity? Or should I have just let the past die with her secrets? Am I the a-hole for never telling my twin brother that I've been living his life for the last 18 years, and he has no idea he's the one who was supposed to die? My name isn't Aaron. That's the first lie. It's the one that matters most. I was born as Elijah, 3 minutes after my brother Aaron, in a dimly lit hospital in the middle of nowhere. We were mirror twins, opposites, left-handed, right-handed. He cried. I didn't. He was praised for being bright and precocious. I was strange, quiet, watched things too closely. Our parents loved Aaron more. I don't even blame them now. I saw it even then. He was easier to explain. I was not. I broke toys open to see how they worked. I asked about death before I was 5. I stared too long at mirrors, at people. I think it unsettled them. We were 10 when the fire happened. The house lit up like paper. No one ever figured out how it started. Officially, it was a faulty furnace, but I remember the smell of gasoline in the hallway. I remember the back door being locked from the outside, and I remember standing in the smoke-filled hallway, looking at my twin brother, who had fallen unconscious from the fumes. There was only one way out, one body I could carry, one identity I could claim, one life I could live. So I did. I dragged him out, left my own shoes behind. The fire took care of the rest. By the time the firefighters pulled us out of the wreckage, I had already made the decision. I would be Aaron now, the good twin, the one they missed, the one who got the love. The real Aaron. He never really woke up. He drifted in and out of a coma for months. By the time he came to, he had lost everything, speech, memory, cognition. The doctors said it was permanent brain damage. They told me I was lucky to be alive. They said I'd saved my brother. A hero. I smiled and said thank you. Aaron was placed in long-term care. I visited him once. Just once. He looked at me with blank eyes. I stared back and whispered, "This is mine now." And that was that. I spent the next 18 years living his life. His name, his friends, his spot at a prestigious prep school, his acceptance letter to a top-tier college, his fiancée. Yes, his fiancée. She was supposed to be his. Before the fire, they were childhood best friends. She always said she felt a bond with Aaron like she'd known him forever. Of course she did. She had. But it wasn't me she loved. Not really. That never stopped me from pursuing her anyway. I courted her with every trick I'd ever observed my brother use. I replicated his handwriting, his voice patterns. I faked a memory of a game they played when they were 7. She cried and said, "I thought you forgot." I didn't forget. I remembered everything, and I used it all. We got engaged 3 years ago. I almost told her the truth the night before the wedding. Almost. We sat on the porch under the moonlight, and she asked me, "Do you think people can change, even their core?" I told her, "People are just stories in skin. Change the story, change the person," she smiled. Said that was beautiful. We married the next day. Our honeymoon was perfect, at least for me. I think for her too. She always looked at me with this confused awe, like she couldn't quite believe who I was. Like there was a piece of the puzzle, missing she couldn't find. But she never asked, and I never told her. But here's where it gets worse. This year, something happened. Aaron woke up, fully. The doctors called it spontaneous neuroplastic recovery. A miracle. After 18 years, he regained language, memory, cognition, slowly like a fog lifting, and as it lifted, he started saying things, dangerous things. He said, "I'm not Elijah." He said, "That boy in the mirror." He wasn't. Me, he said, "You have to find my brother, he's not dead." And he drew a picture, it was of me, not as I look now, but as I did when I was 10. The nurse was disturbed enough to call the family. My parents, now in their late 60s, called me. Said it was probably confusion, said it was nonsense. But my mother's voice trembled in that way that told me she didn't believe herself. I visited Aaron in secret, walked into the rehab. Santa wearing sunglasses, a hoodie like some cliché criminal. He saw me and froze. His hands started trembling. Then he whispered, "You're not supposed to be real." I said nothing. He said, "You took everything." I said, "I gave you life." He said, "You stole it." He wasn't wrong. I left without signing the visitor book, without looking back. That was 2 weeks ago. Yesterday, my wife came to me crying. She had found a letter in the mail, an old birthday card with no return address. Inside, a photo. Me and Aaron, age 6. She looked at me and said, "You never told me you had a twin." I laughed it off, said it must have been photoshopped, but her hands were shaking. I think she knows, or suspects. I haven't slept in 3 days. I've thought about running, about burning it all down again. But I'm not 10 anymore. And now, there's a child, our daughter. Well, his daughter, I suppose, if you want to be technical. So now I sit here in the dark, wondering if maybe I should confess. Tell her everything. Tell everyone. End the lie. But then I look at my life, my daughter, my wife, my home, my job, and I think, why should I? I've built something beautiful from blood and fire and lies. I've lived it longer than I ever lived. The truth. I am Aaron now, and maybe the world's better off this way. So Reddit, am I the a-hole? Or am I just what happens when the wrong twin survives and decides to make it count? I never thought I'd be the kind of person to dig up a body in my own backyard, but I also never thought I'd end up living in a house that wasn't mine, with a name that wasn't mine, a wife I never loved, and a past that had been carefully rewritten by people who called themselves my family. It started with the inheritance, not the money, though that's what made me suspicious. It was the letter. A faded, yellowing envelope addressed to someone named Thomas Elridge, which had been hidden beneath a loose board in the attic of my late grandmother's house, the house I had just been given after she passed. The strange thing was, my name is Jacob Wallace, or at least I thought it was. The handwriting in the letter matched the old journal entries I'd found earlier that month, entries my grandmother had written in the 1960s about Thomas learning to walk, learning to speak, a favorite song he sang, a broken arm he got when he was 5. She'd written those things with the kind of love only a parent or a grandparent could have, but I'd never heard the name Thomas Elridge before. Not once. Not in our family, not in any photos, not in any records. Still, I assumed it was an old memory, a lost child, maybe a miscarriage. But then I found the birth certificate. That's when everything cracked open. It was filed in a box beneath old Christmas decorations and tax documents in the attic. Thomas Elridge, born July 11th, 1989. Mother's name, Margaret Elridge, no father listed. I was born July 11th, 1989. But my mother's name was supposed to be Melissa Wallace, and she wasn't born until 1973. Margaret was her mother, my grandmother. I didn't know what to do with that information. My grandmother had always been a cold woman, but she'd raised me after my mother ran off when I was a baby. That's what I'd always been told, that Melissa Wallace, my mother, had been troubled, drug addict, unstable, a risk, that she abandoned me at 9 months, old and disappeared. My grandmother said it like fact, like scripture. She never cried about it. She never said Melissa was dead, but the implication was always there. So I never asked. But now here I was, looking at a certificate that suggested I wasn't who I thought I was. That Margaret wasn't my grandmother. She was my mother. Which meant Melissa wasn't my mother, maybe not even my relative. I couldn't breathe. I called my Aunt Denise, Margaret's sister, and asked her plainly, "Who is Thomas Elridge?" There was a long pause. Then she hung up on me. I tried again the next day. She didn't answer. Then my uncle, Margaret's brother, showed up at my door that night drunk and begged me to stop digging. Literally, he said, "You don't want to know what's under that house, son. Let the dead stay buried," he cried. A grown man sobbing in my hallway, reeking of whiskey, clutching my arm like I was a ghost. I asked him again. He only said, "She was trying to protect you. From what she did. From what we all did." I started to think I'd been adopted illegally. That maybe Melissa was a teenage pregnancy cover-up and they falsified documents to save face. But then I found the second certificate. A death certificate. Thomas Elridge, deceased, age 9. No cause listed. No official county seal. It looked fake, badly forged. It was in a folder labeled "Closed," tucked between old bills. And that's when I realized, if they faked his death, and if I am Thomas, then who died? Who was buried, or worse, was anyone? I hired a private investigator. I didn't tell my wife, I didn't tell anyone. I just gave him every document I had, every thread. He came back 2 weeks later looking pale as a corpse. He said, "There are no records of Melissa Wallace giving birth. None. And get this. There's no record of her at all after 1990. No job. No taxes, no ID renewals, no social, nothing. It's like she vanished or never existed. But I had pictures, I'd seen them growing up. A woman holding me as a baby, birthday hats, blurry smiles." "That's the thing," he said. "You're in those pictures, but she's not. I ran facial recognition, no matches, that woman is nobody." The walls were closing in. I started losing sleep. I started drinking. My wife noticed. She asked if it was the house, if grief over my grandmother was hitting late. I said yes, but inside I was spiraling. One night I woke up and walked to the attic like I was sleepwalking. I started tearing up boards, knocking on them, listening for hollowness. I found it around 3 a.m., a spot in the far corner, loose, not just boards, dirt. The foundation had been hollowed. Something was buried there. I didn't call the police, I didn't tell anyone. I just started digging, slowly, obsessively in the dead of night. I didn't even know what I was hoping to find. Part of me thought, maybe it was money, maybe drugs. But when the shovel hit something hard and hollow and knocked, I froze. It was a knock, not an echo, not a scrape, a wooden box. My blood went cold. I opened it slowly. Inside was a skeleton. Small. Human. Child-sized, wrapped in a blanket that said TE, stitched into the corner. My initials. I dropped the shovel and screamed. I didn't even know I was screaming until my wife burst in from downstairs. She saw it. She saw him. And then she saw me. She said, "Oh my God. What did you do?" But I didn't know. I didn't know what to say. I didn't do anything. I was trying to find the truth, but the truth looked like I had just uncovered a murdered child. Me. We called the police. I told them everything. Everything I knew. The journals. The certificates, the photos, the letters, they exhumed the remains, they ran DNA. It took weeks, weeks of hell. Then the detective came to our house and said, "The body belongs to a child aged 8 to 10, no DNA match with you. But we did match the maternal DNA, Margaret Elridge, so it wasn't me, but it was someone related to me." Then they said the child was Melissa Wallace's biological daughter. So now the truth comes out. Melissa had a daughter, not a son. A girl, named Lily. Born in 1984, she was 5 years older than me. The woman I grew up calling Mom in those pictures. She wasn't Melissa. She was a friend of Melissa, a decoy. The real Melissa was killed by my grandmother, Margaret. She had a baby in 1989, me. But she'd already killed her daughter, Lily, and buried her under the attic. Why? Nobody knows. She never confessed. The story was pieced together through the journals, through letters, through one final tape found in the walls, a tape where Margaret muttered, she was going to tell, she was going to take him, she was going to ruin everything. I think Melissa found out about Lily. Maybe she confronted Margaret. Maybe Margaret killed her too. but her body was never found, and the woman I thought was Melissa was likely paid to raise me for a while, until she ran, or was silenced, or vanished. The lies were so deep, so thick. My name was Thomas Elridge, but I had no mother, no grandmother, just a family of murderers who took turns erasing each other. And now I live in this house, a house of bones, a house of shadows. My wife left me, took our daughter, said she couldn't raise a child in a cursed bloodline. I don't blame her. I live alone now. I don't touch the attic. I don't even go upstairs. And some nights when the wind blows through the walls, I swear I hear knocking. Just knocking. So Reddit, I guess I'm asking, am I the a-hole for not burning this place to the ground? Or am I just the final ghost in a story built on corpses?